we have a very interesting next program item with Toni Caven from Reprocade, showing us the Defender by Williams and showing what it's needed to be done to the Defender to keep it operating here at the Finnish Museum of Games. So please, Toni.
All right. Thank you. Can everybody hear me? Or shall I put it louder? This is good. All right. Welcome to my little presentation for the Defender. This is a fine example of a classic arcade game which was made in the golden era of arcade games. It's fast gameplay, simple graphics, easy to learn, hard to master. It was released by Williams in 1981, and it was designed by a team led by Eugene Jarvis and Larry DeMar. Both of those fine gentlemen went on later to develop pinball machines and more arcade games. Eugene Jarvis, for example, created Robotron and Smash TV, and Larry DeMar was one of the team that later in the 90s developed the Addams Family Pinball, which is the most best-selling pinball ever. And well, when Williams decided to start developing arcade games, the first game they released was a clone of Atari Pong, which is the simple tennis type of game. And Defender was their first original idea game. And the team had artistic freedom to create a game they wanted, and they choose the space as an appropriate theme for the game because space is an abstract place, and the graphics back in those days were abstract in their by definition. So the space was their number one choice for the theme of the game. It was released in 1981, and it was Williams' first game, and it became a huge success. It sold 55,000 units, and later on it was ported to almost all the home consoles and home computers of the era. And it was also the horizontal scrolling shoot 'em up game genre defining games. It created or defined the genre which later on got more interesting games during the 80s and 90s and 2000. It was very much the design of the game was very much limited by the hardware, as it was in all the games of that era. What the players usually found most difficult about the Defender was the control scheme, which has numerous buttons. For example, in comparison with Pac-Man, which only had a 4-way joystick and a 1-player start, 2-player start button. This had more buttons, and it was more difficult for players to play. And it was voted later as one of the most difficult games of all time. There's also because Williams the manufacturer was an old school pinball manufacturing company. They didn't have any experience in creating original arcade games before Defender, so obviously they needed to reuse some of the pinball technology they had, the know-how of pinball technology in Defender. And as I will show you later, the sound port inside the Defender is the same sound port that is used in Williams' pinball games of the era. So the sound effects are very much alike in other pinball games by Williams and other arcade games. Later, after Defender, there became Stargate, which is Defender 2, and Robotron, and they all used the same sound port. So Williams recycled the same technology in many of their games. In the game, you can pull it up right now. In the game, you control a starship, and the control scheme is like there's only vertical movement from the joystick for the spaceship. It goes only up or down. The height of the flight of the spaceship is with the joystick, and then you by pressing thrust button and fire button you can shoot lasers and give inertia movement for the spaceship. So the control scheme isn't as straightforward as it is in Pac-Man. For example, you want to go right, you turn right. You want to go left, you turn left. You need to change the inertia of the ship to begin moving either direction. And that was very much not common back in the days in the games of the day. Then I can show you quickly. There's the you can go up and down, and then you press thrust button. You can go one direction, but then there's the reverse button which reverses your direction, and then you begin thrusting that one. So you need to give thrust to either direction to go to places. And with that in mind, we can open the control panel and see that since Williams was a pinball company, they used the same buttons as in pinball machines on the side, which you use to control flippers, bats. These are leaf switches. A leaf switch is basically it's two metal plates that have a connecting pieces adjacent to each other, and when you press it, they make an electrical connection, allowing the electricity to flow into the circuit board. These are very fine switches, but of course there is one problem, is that they are open design, so dirt and oxidization can go into between those leaves, and then problems will occur. These need to be cleaned at regular intervals. For example, putting a piece of paper here and then pressing the button, and then you can this kind of movement, and it will, well, if I had proper paper, it would gather some dirt from there. Also, the joystick is made of leaf switches, so there's two leaf switches which will get you up or down. And now, turn this machine around. And we can see the insides of the game. Later in the 80s, the game electronics went of course into that they become more complex. But here is an example of style they used in pinball machines of the era. The pinball machines have a big black box where there are score displays and so on, and all the circuit boards are all the circuit boards are on separate positions, and here is the same kind of positioning as there is in a traditional pinball game. They are on this left side wall, and there are separate boards for everything. We can begin with the interface board, which is the one here which has the orange wires. The orange wires come from the control panel, and there is one wire for each leaf switch, and the interface board then communicates with the processor board which buttons the player has pressed. Usually when a button stops working, if it isn't the leaf switch, then it's the problem in the interface board. There is a couple of LS74 series chips which control the inputs and then output accordingly to the processor, and if one of the inputs is broken, the chip needs to be changed, and then the button starts working again, usually. On this particular board, there has been two chips replaced by me, so obviously there has been problems before with some buttons not working. Then we have the sound board, which I talked earlier. This is the sound board that's the same board as was used in Williams pinball machines. It has its own microprocessor, its own ROM chip, so it's a own entity. You can take it away and put it on a table and give it electronic, voltages, and it will produce sound. It gets commands from the CPU to trigger sounds during the gameplay, and the sounds are stored in the ROM chip, which has the software in. Below the soundboard, there's the ROM board, which are these chips which are tagged with, everybody see, are tagged with red labels here. This is the ROM board, and this has all the software and graphics inside. If one wants to, for example, play the prototype version of Defender, one can burn the software onto new ROM chips and then replace these chips with the burnt chips and insert them into the sockets, and then you can play another version of Defender if you want. Also, some of the versions of Defender can be converted into another game. For example, Robotron uses pretty much alike same board set, and Defender 2, which is Stargate. They use pretty much the same board set, so by changing the ROM chips, you can play a totally another game if you want. And then we come to the main board, the processor board, which is below here. This is the biggest board. And basically there are two main, the biggest problem with Defender and Stargate and Robotron is the processor board RAM chips. Williams used a RAM chip which is type 4116, and the RAM chip uses 3 different voltages. The voltages are plus 5 volts, minus 5 volts, and plus 12 volts. Usually when a chip loses its voltage, it turns off, it doesn't work. But if those 4116 chips lose any of their voltages, they will self-destroy. So that's very unhandy. Luckily we can replace those 4116 chips with 4164 chips, which use only the plus 5 volts, and they don't mind if the 5 volts goes missing. The original 4116 chips can be taken away and replaced by the 4164s, but there is also a special power adapter that needs to be used in order to cut off the minus 5 and plus 12 volts going to the chips. Here is a power modification has been done on this machine, so these are 4164 chips. The 4116 chips, which are the original ones, they are also, in addition to those 3 voltages, they also run very hot and are very prone to failure. So they are the first things we replace when trying to bulletproof a Defender or a Robotron or a Stargate game. We remove the old chips, old RAM, and replace them with the new, better RAM. Another problem, which is with the CPU board, is that the onboard, the game settings and high score lists are kept memorized by the board with batteries, and the batteries are usually located in the top left, or if I look here, top right corner of the board. And batteries usually start to leak if they are not replaced on regular intervals. And the leakage of the batteries is very acid, so it will destroy the motherboard if left unrepaired or handled properly. With this particular game, there wasn't any leakage from batteries on the processor board, but in any case, we took a separate battery holder and installed it here. So the batteries are now much more easier to change through the coin door, and if in case they start to leak, they won't go on the board and destroy things. One thing to notice also is that the processor board has a test button or reset switch of its own, so it's very handy if you need to troubleshoot this board. You can take it away from here and put it on a bench and give voltage, and then you can troubleshoot it with an oscilloscope and so on, and you can reset it from the button. And also the soundboard has its own reset button or test button over here, so it's basically a multi-processor system. Below the processor board there's the power supply board, which has all the fuses and main rectifiers and so on. And the power board is the second most working board in a Defender game. It needs to provide continuous and clean voltages and electricity for all of these chips and boards. Usually when a power board fails, it's due to connector oxidization or old fuses. For example, if a game has original fuses, it has never burned a fuse, even the old fuses can go bad during 20 or 30 years. A couple of times we have had a fuse go bad just by itself without any other problems in the game. And the power boards are very enduring. The mostly working part of a Defender or any arcade game is the display. The CRT display is it operates on many volts. It has highly and strictly controlled magnetic fields and basically a particle accelerator. It accelerates particles from the cathode, color cathodes which are inside the tube here, and it accelerates them towards the front of the display, where they will sort of crash into the front of the panel, and they emit visible light. And it's a process that will take very strict tolerances in order for the image to be clear and very precise. Mostly the CRT tubes, when they start to go old, they can be rejuvenated using a CRT rejuvenator, which is a separate device which is connected. This neck cord is removed and the rejuvenator is connected to the neck of the tube, and then we can analyze the condition of the tube, and the cathode. The color cathodes can also be rejuvenated by pulses of electricity, and that's one way of getting more better picture from an old CRT. The CRT transistors are also which are the horizontal output transistor and vertical IC. They are very hardly working components, and they usually need to be replaced. And also there's a black and gray line output transformer, which is also called a flyback. It's the unit which creates most of the voltages a CRT display needs, and it also creates the 25 kilovolts needed to accelerate the particles to the front of the tube. That component also is very prone to failure. Usually, especially with these Italian Hantarex displays, they have flyback problems very often. And there's also there's a marquee on top of the machine which displays the game's name. There's a fluorescence tube which is usually replaced by an LED strip these days, because the fluorescence tube emits UV light, and it will make the marquee turn yellow over time. So that's an unwanted situation. So it's one of those things that will cosmetically destroy the front of the game if the original fluorescence tube is used for a long periods of time. On this particular game, there's a signature from Eugene Jarvis, so it's protected by a plexiglass here. But usually this plexiglass isn't on these games. But yeah, this is it's lighted by an LED, as you can see. Any questions at this point, please?
So you said that there's an Italian CRT?
It's a hand direct.
Is this like a European version of the machine?
No, this was made in the States, but it was later replaced in the Europe with the hand directs. It's normal for operators back in the 80s. If they had a monitor malfunction, they just take another appropriately sized monitor and insert it into the machine. Some of the operators even change the size of the display. If they don't have a 19-inch at hand, they will put a bigger or smaller in, and then they will cut a bezel from cardboard to, you know, accommodate a bigger or smaller display. Usually these Defenders, the Williams games, come with Wells Gardner K4900 model of CRT displays. Any more questions? Please do.
How do you generally cope with very old parts? If you, like, some of the parts were missing or destroyed and it's no longer being manufactured, how do you handle it?
We have had to laser cut some parts and 3D print some parts, but those are mainly for pinball machines. For arcade machines, there is plenty of reproduction parts available these days, because the arcade and retro gaming boom has been very high for the last 10 years or so. So there are many manufacturers in the States manufacturing replacement parts for the most used parts of games, and many hobbyists are designing and manufacturing new parts for games themselves. For example, well, this isn't arcade related as such, but there is an Atari used to build pinball machines. They built only 6 or 7 different pinball machines before they stopped doing pinball machines. They tried to enter the pinball industry, but they failed. Atari used different displays, score display, in their pinball machines. All the other manufacturers used the standard score displays, but Atari went to a different approach. And because they are old, the displays are very old these days, we have one Atari pinball in our repair shop at this moment, and the display is dead. So we are now designing a new display for it from 7-segment LED display elements. I have a guy working on doing a new printed circuit board, and we will try to develop it into a new spare part that we can resell to other hobbyists, other Atari pinball owners, so they can get their game back working fully. So that kind of work needs to be done, and it's a community thing. You need to know people to you need to know people to have connection. One person is a specialist on other parts of pinball machines, and one guy is a very expert on, for example, different ROM chips. There are ROM chips that are very exotic which aren't made anymore. They were made in late 70s, and I know a guy who knows a guy who has a stock full of those chips, and nobody else does. So in order to get things working, you need to know a lot of people and coordinate as a community to get the spare parts. Okay, thank you. Please do.
You probably have to make these decisions when working with these machines. Like, do you rather aim to make them good as new, or do you want to keep the stains and cracks that are already good?
It always depends what the customer wants. I have a customer who wants to get his games in 9 out of 10 condition. That means we have to replace the side arts. On this game, the side art is stenciled, so it's not a sticker as such, and it's not a silk screen either. It's a stencil you put on the side, and then you spray paint over it through the stencil. But many of the later 80s games have side art stickers. So, for example, for that customer, we need to replace all those side arts, and it's a costly thing. I myself prefer to keep the game as is, because it's the history of the game. It shows these are not new games; these are old games, and they can look old games. It's allowed for them to look old. They don't need to look like new games. As long as the functionality of the game, the controls of the game, they need to be in top shape. The cosmetics and the damage, or if somebody has scribbled their name on the side of the machine, it's okay, because it's the history of the game. We have pinball machines which have people's dates and names signed on the bottom of the pinball machines. You know, Lauri and Kaisa, and a date when they have met, for example, and they have written it below the pinball machine bottom. It isn't visible if you look, unless you look under the bottom. It's no problem to let the text be there, because it's the history of the game. The game has been some relevance to those persons, and it's okay. But we can make them look like new if we want. But I think that's not the purpose. That's not the main thing to do. Yeah, please do.
So the coin slot says 2 MK, so that's Finnish marks?
Yes, 2 marks and 5 marks.
Okay.
5 marks for 3 games and 2 marks for 1 game.
Okay. So this had been used in Finland
Yes.
in the 80s?
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Many of the late 70s and early 80s games were destroyed by political decision making, and there's a book coming out next year, a Finnish book about this situation, where the government overtook all the games from private operators, and I've heard a statistic that around 6,000 games were removed from private operators all around Finland, and about 5,000 of them were totally destroyed. There's Pac-Mans and I guess Defenders and so on. They were all lost in that time, and it created a vacuum of classic original dedicated arcade cabinets, which we are trying to refill. We are importing more games from Finland to Finland, slowly but surely. And yeah, it's a rare thing to see an original Finnish game that was used in Finland back in the day, because many of them are lost or sold to Sweden or somewhere else. Yep.
Yeah, just an aside from what you said. The reason for the destruction was that a monopoly to all coin-operated entertainment, both the gambling machines and the entertainment machines, was given to the Finnish Machine Association. They took over all of the machines from the private operators, and their rationale was that they were used to destroying their own machines because they wouldn't allow them to be operated by anyone else. So this was the logical thing to do. When a machine was at the end of its life, they destroyed it so it could be operated anywhere else, which is very unfortunate. But that was like that was the rationale. They didn't just destroy them for the heck of it. They were trying to protect the monopoly given to them by the political.
Kerro näille lyhyesti myös itsestä ja firmasta. Kuka sä oot?
About myself. I have been working from 2013 full time on arcade machines and pinball machines. But before that, I was a hobbyist for about 10 years or so. And in 2008, I managed to get a hold of 25 machines which were going into destruction. They were to be recycled into parts, and I got them rescued and learned how to repair and restore the games during my leisure time. So it began as a hobby, and now I don't have any pinball games and arcade games at home because I have all them at work. And we operate pinball machines and arcade games in southern Finland. We have around 160 games in stock at this moment, and we have another container coming in from the States beginning of next year, and then we will have around 185 machines in inventory. We have all the classic games from beginning from Asteroids in '79, and Space Invaders and Pac-Man and Miss Pac-Man and Defender. We have 2 Defenders and 1 Stargate, and 4 Ultrons. Ultron was a very popular game by Sega back in the late 80s. And we try to bring more games to people for playing and enjoying the nostalgia of the games. We have couple of places in Helsinki and Tampere and Jyväskylä which you can play our games. For example, here in Tampere there is a barcade which has 20 of our games to be played on tokens, Blasteroid tokens, which are our own coin, which was designed by a friend of mine. The coin, and it's a new thing in Finland to have a barcade or an arcade in the 2000, this millennia. The phenomena in the Finland wasn't as tense. It wasn't as big thing. The coin op games weren't as big thing in Finland back in the 80s as they were in the States. So obviously in the States this whole barcade and retro gaming phenomena it's exponentially bigger than here, but it's a good. The direction is good at this moment. The future is looking good for retro gaming and arcade gaming.
Yeah. And Toni and Reprocade is also taking care of the machines of the Finnish Museum of Games, whether they're sort of our machines or machines on loan from the various parties.
Many of the games here in Finland were manufactured by Electrocoin UK in the Great Britain. There are many examples of those games in here, but in these early games they were most likely imported from the States because the phenomena was only coming. It wasn't. It was slowly building here.
What about early games like Space Invaders?
Yeah, Space Invaders and Asteroids and so on.
Electric coins or imported?
To my knowledge, they were imported. Yeah, but from the US. Yeah, but in the same time, when the Finnish Slot Machine Association monopolized the games, they began to develop their own cabinet, which could house games. It was a generic cabinet that you could insert a board in, and then you could play that game. There's one example, the R1000, which is around this wall there. It's one of the best examples of the Finnish design of an arcade cabinet. I like it. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful cabinet, and it's the only cabinet I know that was mass produced in Finland, and they are 1100.
There was the AR1000.
Yes.
The AR2000.
2000. Okay. That I have.
But then the AR1100 was made by a target.
Yes. Yeah, okay, I have never heard about the AR 2000, but that AR 1000 was popular, and the AR 1100 was even more popular. It was built by Atari in Ireland, and with cooperation with Finnish Automation, the association, they designed it together. And it's a very robust cabinet. Also, that cabinet is over there in the arcade. It's a very nice cabinet to have if you are an operator. Everything can be accessed from the front, and everything is accessible. You don't need to go to the back of the machine to repair it. Everything can be done from the front side. It's a nice cabinet, but very heavy. Right. Any more questions, please? Please do.
You happen to come across one of these and you're kind of layman and don't know what to do then? Is there some like do's and don'ts before you pass it on to anybody?
Sorry, what do's and don'ts?
If you come across one of these, like then, is there something you would need to know? Like, do this, don't do that?
Yeah, first of all, don't power it up. Open everything. Open all the doors and go through all the fuses. If any of the fuses are burned, then there most likely is a problem you don't want to give electricity to. You need to first check where the fuse goes, what the fuse does, and then check that part before you replace a fuse, and then try to power it up. Also, what comes to the CRT displays, some of the operators were mishandling these games as such that I will quickly show you here this is the neck board of the game, the display. The neck of the display is very thin glass. It's very delicate. One thing to look before you give electricity to any display is to look if it's intact. If there are cracks or anything in the neck, don't power it up. And yeah, the fuses are the most important thing you need to check. And of course, if there are any burn marks or so on the boards, you need to check for those as well before powering up the game. Because if there's a malfunction with any of the chips or components, main power components, they can burn more components and you get more work before you can play.
Also, don't get electrocuted.
Sorry?
Don't get an electric shock.
Don't get electrocuted. Yes, then it's not nice. So far I have managed to spare myself from getting any electric shocks from displays, but I know a former TV repairman who has had 3 times the 25 kilovolts from there. He said that it won't obviously kill you, but it's not a thing you want to do again. Yeah. There is no amperage. They usually say that voltage don't kill, but amperage does, and amps do. The current will kill you. There is basically no amperage. It's just high voltage. It's 1.0 milliamps or so the amperage. So it's not that dangerous. But if you get a zap from there, it can you can jolt backwards and then hit yourself or drop from the 3rd floor or something like that. Yeah. Any more questions? Please do.
As a people enthusiast, what are the like player or having machines like this and in people where it's like natural that they are function
But this thing that part of the game.
It's that is most fragile. You mean what is the most fragile part in a game?
Yeah, I mean, are these arcade machines, do they have like a weak spot, maybe monitor or
yes,
joystick?
monitor and joystick are the most weak spots, for example.
Because
Yeah.
when I look at the site, I mean, are there like damages from like the physical wireless or?
No. Usually if a game gets the most damage through this joystick is you, for example, small children like to pull it and abuse it, and the most fragile part inside an arcade game, which is for this kind of thing, is the monitor. The monitor has the most working parts inside, so it runs hot, and there can be soldering points that can crack because of the stress. And the CRT display itself, the tube, is it's a fragile thing. So you can break a TV tube if you smack it on the side too many times. And of course. If you pour a drink over a pinball machine, the pinball glass protects the machine, and there are holes in which the liquid can go out of the pinball machine. But on these arcade games, there isn't such precautions. So if you pour a liquid on the control panel, which I believe usually happens when you are drinking and playing a game. It can easily happen. Then all these leaf switches need to be cleaned, and even in some arcade cabinets, the boards itself, the electronics can be below the control panel or near, so they can get damaged with that kind of mishaps. I hope I answered your question. Okay.
But if you can still speak about pinball machines.
Yep.
How about them? The ball itself.
It's very.
So much. I mean, pinball machines, they are always broken.
Yes, there are two.
They are never.
Yeah.
Never.
There are two types of. Yes.
But it's obvious that it's all time not used for different very parts. But how about this flip plate? This that player says how much is like is the technique more bulletproof or
in pinball machines than arcade machines? No, I think the electronics themselves, the mechanics of pinball machine, the electronic parts, they have the same kind of problems with solder points fracturing due to stress than the arcade machines. There isn't a difference. Pinball machines tend to vibrate or shake more than arcade machines, though they get those kind of malfunctions more easily. And old saying goes that there are two types of pinball machines, ones that are broken and ones that are going to be broken very soon. Yeah. I like arcade games better. They last better in a restaurant environment than pinball machines. And last summer in May we went for a study travel into Los Angeles, and we went over the barcades and arcades there. And I chatted with the technicians and the personnel there, and all of them said that the pinball machines suck when it comes to reliability. The pinball machines eat in spare parts and time what they earn. But arcade machines, they just keep on going. They had Virtua Fighter arcade games which were constantly played on. And they said that they needed to change the joysticks and all the buttons once per month. But that's all that's all the problems there is. There's no other problems on them games. They last much better than the pinball machines.
looking at the wear at the front, is that like people being
Yes.
resting their shoe?
Yes, that's the one. There are a couple of types of common wares on arcade machines. For example, Pac-Man is a game that's mostly played with one hand. Defender is played, of course, on two hands, but Pac-Man is played with one hand. And the cabinet has a Pac-Man wear. Usually, the Pac-Man cabinet usually has a wear at this place, where you can, when you play it with this kind of stance. And I haven't seen a Pac-Man cabinet without that wear. Midway, the manufacturer of Pac-Man cabinets and other classics, also used a kick plate in their cabinets. There is a plastic plate which goes from side to side, right about on this height of the machine, so it's protected from the shoes, unlike this one. But yeah, Pac-Man is a game mostly famous for wear on this side. It's a thing. Okay. Thank you.
Yes.